Let me cover this one topic that I had. Doctor calls and one of my clients calls and says, "Hey, what do you do when the attorney asks you to cut the bill, but he won't meet with you?" Now, remember, the number one reason they're asking you to cut their bill and treating you bad is because they don't value your services. That's it. That's the bottom line. And that's why this presentation I talk about is so valuable, because that's what creates authority and credibility. It gets them to see that, we're heads and shoulders above the crap they're used to getting, the documentation crap that they're used to getting, because it is crap. So how do we handle that? Well, in this particular case, the guy was asking for a reduction in fees, and that's what happens when they don't value you. They'll ask. That's like I had attorneys ask before I did the presentation. They would try to cut my bill, but I'm like, real quick, I learned I got to get to the presentation as fast as possible, because as soon as I get to the presentation, the whole dynamic of the relationship changes. They no longer keep treating us like a little boy and degrading us and putting us in the same box as all the other crappy documenting chiropractors. Okay. That change. And then again, I say all the time, 50% of the attorneys ask me and my clients to be their expert witness 50% of the time after that presentation, because they now see somebody knows what the hell they're doing. And they're not going to lose a lot of money dealing with us like they do with all the other bad documentation. So what I told him, I said, so he wouldn't meet. It was like he couldn't get past the paralegals. Now, this was a big law firm, so it's much harder to get past the paralegals. And I said, well, you can't just let it go. You can't just give them a discount, because they'll just keep treating you bad. You'll have no authority, no credibility, and they'll just keep treating you bad. I said, so what I would do is said, yeah, I'd be interested in giving you a 20% discount, but only if you meet with me for 20 minutes to go through the documentation, to go through the injury award documentation that I've documented to support your injury award. Now, you got an attorney that doesn't meet for that, it's a real problem. So that's what you want to do. Number two is tell the patient. You want to tell the patient, say, hey, patient, because remember, the patient has a lot more credibility with the attorney than you, the chiropractor, at this particular point in time. So you would tell the patient, say, hey, your attorney's asking for a discount, but he won't meet with me and he won't talk with me about the case. What does that mean to you, Mr. Patient? Well, I'm willing to give a 20% discount if I can show him the documentation to the case. It only takes about 20 minutes. That's it. I'm only asking for 20 minutes of their time. But he's not willing. But that's 20% more that you'll get. See, now I'm going to put the pressure on the patient to make the phone call and say, hey, I want you to meet with my doctor. He said he'll give you a 20% discount if you meet with him and go over the documentation. I want you to meet with him. Well, I tell the patient to tell him that, because it's worth it for me to do that, because the presentation is so powerful. It totally shifts the relationship where you're the absolute authority. And like I told you, 50% of the time they ask you to be their expert witness, and you get all the referrals for that geographic location. That's what happens. So that first, you want to use the 20% as leverage to get to the presentation, and then also go to the patient. And why should he tell him to call? Well, what's going to be his motive to call? Well, tell him you'll get 20% more. I'll give a 20% discount if he just meets with me to go over the documentation for 20 minutes. So why don't you just call him and tell him to meet with me? Because he'll take your phone call. He's not taking mine. I'm going to leverage that 20% discount to get to that meeting. Otherwise, you got a really stupid attorney on the other end. So anyway, that's how you want to handle that, is to get to the present, because once you know the presentation, the whole dynamic changes. And those of you that have done the presentation, you know this. If you've never done the presentation, you don't know this. You're still going from a position of weakness, scarcity and weakness. So as soon as you do that, know the presentation, and you give it and you see the results the very first time, you'll never be weak and pathetic again. And they won't treat you like that anymore. And you'll get all the referrals. Everything changes. Everything changes on a dime when you give that presentation. So anyway, that's how you handle not getting through to the attorney, but yet them wanting a discount.